Welcome to the Sellernomics podcast, sharing valuable tips and information in the Amazon and e-commerce space. Each week, we deliver the best interviews with some of the top Amazon personalities in the industry to help you grow your business. Today's episode is brought to you by GETIDA, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. And now, here is your host, Rob Stanley.
Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode of Sellernomics podcast. I got a really good one today. First, I'm going to give you the topic. We're talking about how to gain huge advantages with Amazon listing optimization. And that is, of course, with Danny Carlson. Danny, welcome to the Sellernomics podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good to talk to you again, Rob. I think last time we talked was in London, which was super cold for me, man. It is super cold over there compared to where I normally live in Bali over here. But that was cool to see you in person over there.
It was finally nice to see each other in person. It's been a while since we've even seen each other online, but people don't want to know about that. Let's talk straight about listing optimizations. It's always great to talk to Danny. We'll talk some more at the end here about his company, but I know everybody wants to hear some tips and some listing optimizations. It's such a big topic. Let's jump right into this. And just off air earlier, Danny was telling me about this thing called triple optimized Amazon listing method. Never heard of it. I was like, man, you got to tell me more about that. It sounds really cool. So Danny, what is a triple optimized Amazon listing method? I had to write it down because it was so long and sounds very intense and very in-depth. Tell us what is that and how do you use it?
Yeah, so I've been optimizing Amazon listings since 2016. So the triple optimized listing method essentially identified that there's three really main pillars of optimizing a listing, just to really simplify it for everybody. So keyword optimization, I think most people listening will know what that is, right? You obviously need the right keywords and search terms in your listing so that Amazon's search algorithm and customers know what your product is. The second most important part is called key info optimization, which is the info that the customers need to see to make their buying decision. I would say that's maybe the most important one. Then the third one is persuasive desire optimization. That is essentially the psychology of sales in the written form, so that if people see your listing, do they actually envision themselves purchasing and getting the benefit from your product? So if I were to say that there's one that people do wrong the most often, it's usually key info optimization. We're definitely going to go into that a little bit more in a second, but the reason people mostly get it wrong is because if someone looks at your listing and they can't instantly get the main benefits and the most key parts of the information about your listing. So if it's a Bluetooth product, for example, like a certain type of Bluetooth that is compatible with a certain type of phone, for example, that's a super key piece of information that if someone doesn't find very quickly and easily in the images, in the title, and the A+ content, for example, they're probably going to click off to some other listing, or they're at least not going to be confident enough to press that add to cart button because they're not even sure if it's going to work for them. Does that make sense, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. That sure does. So that's pretty good. Why don't we dive a little more into each of those areas? So those are there's three different areas you're talking about, and let's go into each of those just a little bit more and talk a little more about how can people take advantage of those areas, or what maybe are they doing wrong in each of those areas, what things they can fix in each of those areas to try to optimize their listing, obviously. So give us a little more info on that, Danny.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the first one, which is keyword optimization. So I think most people understand they need to put the keywords in there, but I think most people do it a little bit too hardcore. You definitely do need keywords in your listing, but not at the expense of making the information readable. So a lot of people, they'll have their title and they're going to basically repeat the same keyword over and over again. They're going to have like barbecue glove, gloves for barbecue, and barbecuing grill gloves, like just over and over. They're just repeating the same information. And it makes it very jumbled for someone scanning the search results page. It looks very messy. It doesn't look professional. It's kind of hard to find any describing information. It's much better to just start with the one main keyword and then put the key info optimization, which for a barbecue glove is maybe black. It's for large hands. Maybe it's really important that it goes up the sleeve a little bit. right? So that's really important key info that you can get across in your title. And then maybe towards the back of the title where people are paying less attention, you're going to sneak in some more keywords. But again, in a way that is readable and is communicating some information, not just repeating the same keywords over and over again. Another piece that people mostly get wrong is the bullet points. So bullet points are not the greatest place for keyword optimization. Yes, you should be putting some good keywords into your bullet points, but most people have the bullet points way too long. So if you've ever seen on Amazon, they don't really let you format the bullet points very much. It's usually all 5 bullet points just right on top of each other, kind of crammed together. You can't put any bolding or spacing in the bullet points. So if your bullet points aren't really short and concise, they're just kind of jammed together into one big block of text. And it's really hard to get any good, useful information out of there if it's not really short and concise. So yes, put some keywords into the bullet points, but it's much better to focus on making the key information in those bullet points really concise, really easy to digest, and not just fluff it up with a bunch of keywords and a bunch of just benefits and random information. That's a big mistake a lot of people make. I know personally, if I look at bullet points that have too much fluff in them or too many keywords, I'm not even going to try to read it because it's hard for the brain, right? We're very lazy today in the social media age for reading giant blocks of text. And then the last thing I'll say about keywords is don't forget about the back end fields as well. So subject matter is probably, in my opinion, the most important place for keywords other than your title. So subject matter is or intended use for some categories will be the replacement for that. Is just a random back-end keyword field, but you should put your most important keywords in the subject matter field. So make sure you're making use of that one.
Yeah, that's good information. So, Danny, let me ask this because I've seen this happen a couple times. As a buyer, I'm looking at those bullet points. I'm looking for information that's going to tell me about that product, maybe key features of it. And I feel like sometimes I look at them and you could just tell they're just trying too hard to like make it rank or to optimize it, right? Like they're just stuffing stuff in there instead of actually giving information. Have you seen something like that? And, obviously you're already suggesting, hey, put information there that's relative or related to the product. Try to, if it happens to be that you can use a keyword in there and it makes sense, then go ahead. But they should be concentrating more on like within those bullet points on the product, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So bullet points are not the most powerful place for indexing and ranking your keywords. So, and it really is to the detriment if you're stuffing too many keywords in there. It's to the detriment to making it readable. It really can't be more than 2 lines of text before it starts to turn into that giant unreadable blob of text. And it's actually pretty difficult. It's going to take you some time to refine your bullet points in a way where you both can clearly get across that key information, the key product features and the key information about your product, while also sneaking in the listing optimization, the keywords. They don't have to be exclusive, right? Sometimes you just have to massage the text you have a little bit to make it exact match keywords. Maybe it won't sound exactly perfect the way you wanted to say it before, but it won't sound really keyword stuffy and inauthentic either.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. It's funny when, I haven't sold in a while, but I still buy a lot. And I kind of critique when I go to buy, like the title, the bullet points, even the description. And it's funny, that just to see some of the things, I'm just like, man, that doesn't look good, or, hey, that looks pretty good, So what about also let's getting more into, the listings and optimization. Let's jump into actually, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back from this quick break, everybody, I'd like to talk to Danny a little more about photos and if they, how important are the photos and not just, I mean, we all know you have to have a photo, but what should be in it, what shouldn't be in it, how important of how many should you have, what do you do on photo number 2, 3, 4, 5 on down the line? Let's do that right after this quick break.
Today's episode is brought to you by GETIDA, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics.
Yeah, so head on over to GETIDA.com/Sellernomics. Take advantage of that $400 in free FBA reimbursements. Today, I've got Danny Carlson on from Kenji ROI, and we're talking about how to gain huge advantages with Amazon listing optimization. So right before the break, Danny, I was just talking to you a little bit about photos. Basically, why do they still matter? What can I do to optimize them? What about photo number 2 through 6 or 7? Tell us some more about photos, on what you've learned and what experiences you've had with those.
Yeah, so photos is by far the trickiest thing on Amazon. It's very complicated to get it right. And I also want to emphasize the importance of this. You probably all heard how important the photos are on Amazon, but just to illustrate that, it's very evident that a lot of customers will only look at the photos and make their buying decision based on the photos. They're probably looking at the price, maybe they're scrolling at their reviews, but a very large chunk of customers are not really paying attention to the text portions. They're not reading your bullet points, they're not reading your product description. And we know this is very self-evident because it's quite common to see 1-star reviews for reasons that were self-evident, like listed, actually written inside of the bullet points or the description. You say this product only works with this certain situation, and then just everyone leaving 1-star reviews for that exact reason, right? So another thing about photos is there's an interesting study. I don't know if you've seen it, Rob, where it says that visuals are processed 60,000 times faster than text in the brain. And it makes sense because humans have evolved to see visual images for hundreds of thousands of years, however long you think human beings have been around for, whereas language is a pretty recent one. Like the current language as we know it today has only been around for 5,000 years, right? And primitive versions of that, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it's much faster and easier to get information across visually whenever you can. So really important to keep that in mind. So I would say with photos that most people approach the photos incorrectly. So it's not the right way to look at it to say you want to have, infographic in number 2 and you want to have a lifestyle image in number 3, et cetera, et cetera. Infographics and lifestyle images are just tools for visually communicating the information. And for different products, there's going to be different better ways, different best ways to communicate specific information to customers. So the right way to think about it is what is the key information that I need to communicate to the customer for this product? And then each piece of those information, what is the most efficient way for me to visually show that? And you got to think about it from the perspective of visual is always the fastest, most efficient way to communicate that to a customer. So you should always show what you can show. You should never write in text on an infographic what you can show visually. So a clear example, like a lifestyle image, you want to show whatever the key information that you're trying to show actually is. So if it's like a baby stroller and it folds up, it's so much more effective to show a model actually folding the baby stroller. People can very, very quickly understand that. They're going to understand how it works in a fraction of a second. Whereas if you had an infographic that had an icon of a folding thing and it said folding and this folds up and that's all you have, then they kind of have to use their imagination. It takes longer for them to understand what it is. They might not even understand how it works. They're like, wait, folding, how does it fold up? They have a lot of questions still, right? So It's important to think of it from the perspective of, okay, so what is the key information that I need to communicate in the images? And then for this specific piece of key information, what am I trying to communicate here?
Yeah, I like that. That's good information, because I have seen infographics that they kind of just point to things, but it would be interesting to see how it's done, right? Like in an image, obviously videos are the best. And as far as showing stuff like that, and you should always definitely have videos. At least I assume so. Danny, what have you seen with videos? Is it almost kind of like now videos are a must? You have to have some sort of video in your listing, or can people still get by without it? What's your thoughts on the whole videos right now for listings?
Yeah, so it definitely helps. But the thing about videos is that it only helps if it's a good video, right? You don't want to get a video just because you need to have a video, because if you put up a video that is not very good, you're wasting one of your image slots, right? You can take away a potential slot to show something with images, and bad videos, people aren't going to watch them, or they're not going to get any useful information from them. So those same principles that I was just talking about with key info optimization, definitely apply to video as well. The attention span, someone's not going to watch a 20-second intro to your video that just talks about your brand or some random thing they don't care about, right? They need to have the information they're looking for. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be effective to communicate the information to them, right? It doesn't have to be a really high budget video where you're hiring models and doing these fancy photo shoots or fancy shoots at shoot locations and things like that. That's better in a lot of cases, but it does have to be effective and really intentional with how it displays that information. So I would just say, if you don't have the means or the budget to create a really good quality video, you're probably better off just keeping a photo there. But it definitely does help if you can create a good video there, because video is the medium of our generation, right? People love watching video.
Absolutely. I liked how you mentioned this was a little bit earlier about like Amazon, or people are very visual, you know, and you obviously said a little bit different, but I kind of see Amazon like a giant image catalog in a way, right? It's like, and I think about when I'm shopping or when I'm looking for something, I'm just looking at the images, scrolling down the page, looking at the titles quickly. And it's like, I'm processing it super quick. And I'm just kind of, you know, looking for what I need. Does it fit what I need? Does an image quickly grab the attention that I need? Maybe a feature I'm looking for on a specific product or something like that. Back to the title. Let's go back to titles for just a little bit more. And let's specifically talk about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but actually, you know what, let's ask this. Danny, what are some of the biggest mistakes that some of the new sellers make when on their listing optimization? And then and I'm hoping it's maybe titles. If it isn't, let us know what it is. And let's talk a little bit more about titles, on how people can take advantage of the titles more to basically optimize. So sorry, there's two questions there.
Yeah, so we can keep focused on titles because there's plenty of mistakes that people make on titles. So keep in mind, guys, that it's going to vary a lot depending on your category. There are a lot of categories that do have very short title character limits where you don't really have a lot of room to play. You know, if your category only allows for 80 characters, you can't put that many keywords in there. It's just not enough space. So, but if you do have the longer title character limit, let's say 200 characters, then you have a little bit more room to put keywords in there. So the biggest mistake I think people make is jumbling the first half of their title. So if you have 200 character title, then probably about half that is going to be visible on the search results page, or even less if they're shopping on the mobile app, right? So you have that first little snippet of text to really communicate the information about the product. And very often what I'll see is sellers will have probably their brand name followed by maybe their main keyword, and then immediately followed by some other piece of information. And there's no spacing in between it. There's no little dash to signify that it's separate information. And so it's difficult, especially if the brand name is just some unknown brand that people don't know about. It's hard to tell where the brand name starts and finishes, and where the product name starts and finishes. And then the other information, it's difficult for the brain to digest. So you want to make sure your title is very easy to digest in a scannable nature, right? Because that's how people look at your title. They're scanning and very quickly digesting, 5, 10, 15 titles on the search results page. They're not just dissecting it and looking at it. So the easiest way to do that, if you do need to put your brand name at the very front, you might consider not doing that if it's not the best brand name, or if it's a really generic brand name that no one knows about. But put a little hyphen, right? Separate your brand name from the actual product name. Separate the product name from any benefit information you want to talk about in the title. Just make it easy and readable. And then once you have the easy and readable, then maybe come back through and see if you can massage things a little bit and put some more keyword phrases in there. But again, massage, right? Don't just go hack everything up and just take away all the readable words and replace them with a bunch of keywords and repeat the same information 5 times. It takes a little bit of time to massage it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of interesting because people come up with these brand names and sometimes they're really super long and they put them at the front, and it just kills when you're on, especially on mobile, when you're searching. It's like you don't even see the information you're looking for, or, the search. I guess that's where the visual maybe come into play. But I agree with you. It definitely, I would rather not see that brand name unless you're a giant brand and that's what you're known for, or you've built up that brand. One of the things I do want to talk a little more about, some of the mistakes. And the reason we talk about mistakes is because we want people to be able to look at these things and fix them. I mean, Danny's been doing this for quite a long time. So what I want to do is take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about some of the things that sellers do wrong and how you can fix them in your listing optimization right after this break.
Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics.
Yeah, so be sure to head on over to GETIDA.com/Sellernomics. Take advantage of that $400 free offer. And once again, I had Danny Carlson from Kenji ROI, and we're talking about how to gain huge advantages with Amazon listing optimization. What I want to come back around to, we were just talking about it before the break, Danny, is please tell us some more things that you see sellers are doing wrong on their listings and how to fix them. What's kind of next on the list that you see is kind of like an item or that something they do wrong, and what's your suggestion on fixing it?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the big one here, and we've touched on this a little bit, but the really big one that is not an easy thing to fix is that most sellers, they don't do a very good job of identifying the key information that the customer actually wants to see in order to make their buying decision, and then optimizing all parts of the listing for those pieces of key information, primarily the images. Let's just focus on the images for a second. So big mistakes that I see in the images are, one, if they have a model, then the model shots are not that intentional. They just probably hired a photographer and they told them, get some shots of this product with the model. And when you do that, you're almost always going to end up with a lot of really beautiful looking photographs of the model, like holding your product and staring at the camera, and it's great. And your product looks cool and the model looks cool, but there's no useful information being included in the photo, right? And maybe you're going to have 6 different angles that don't really show anything, right? So if you're not intentional about the key info that you need to communicate in the images, and you don't communicate that with your photographer, you're not going to have the right images of the model actually interacting with your product in the specific way you need to show, and those kind of things. So got to be intentional about that. And then also the infographics. So the other common mistake with that is that sellers will get a little bit lazy on the other side, where they're like, okay, I'm not going to hire a model. I'm just going to do everything with infographics. And don't get me wrong, this works. It'll get the job done, but it's certainly not the most effective way to communicate that information. If you have your one main image and then 6 infographics behind that, you're forcing your customers to digest that information through reading the text. And especially if people are not making the text really large and easily readable, a lot of people forget that people are shopping a lot on Amazon's mobile app. And if they open up your infographic on Amazon mobile, they're going to have to pinch to zoom in, and then it's going to be impossible to digest the information. Then it's just not the most effective way to communicate. So don't get lazy with that. Do the research into what is the key information that the customer needs to see, and then very specifically design your image set around each one of those pieces of key information, showing as much as possible. And then when you can't show, explain through the infographics.
Yeah, that's really good. And that is one that I've seen quite a bit of people either don't use, take advantage of, or don't do it correctly. So yeah, great tips there. Danny, what other, I'm sure there's some other things I missed on, what other things can Amazon sellers do to optimize their listings that we maybe didn't get a chance to go over? Go ahead.
A+ content is a big one. So again, it's the thing too, where I'm a big believer in the quality. Same as the video. If you don't have a good A+ content, it's better to just not have it than it is to put something there. So quite often I'll see sellers who have a smaller budget, they'll just take the same images that they had at the top of the listing, and then they'll slap it into the A+ content. And it's, one, it just doesn't have the best impression for your customers. It looks cheap. And then 2, you're repeating the same information sometimes for a third time. So in some categories, what Amazon will do is they'll show your images at the top of the listing, and then on mobile, there'll be a second section below that called Image Gallery, where they're showing the same images again for a second time. And then so if you put it in A+ content again, they're just seeing the same images for a third time when they just want to scroll to the reviews. Of course, they're going to have a impression of your brand like it's a kind of cheaper brand and not that good. A+ content is a great opportunity to show a little bit of brand life, a little bit of branding to your customer, right? You can create your custom graphics with your fonts, your brand colors, and some life to your brand outside of just the Amazon white background that's showing, right? You want to have the same consistency between the infographics on your main image, same style, same colors, same sort of graphics and everything like that as the images in your A+ content. And you want to make sure that every image, in my opinion, should be branded in some way. So meaning that you shouldn't have just white background images of any kind thrown in A+ content. It should look like it's your own custom designed website, because that's basically what it is. It's basically just like a drag and drop mini website for your product that you can build in Amazon. You could make it however you want with the different modules. So why would you waste that opportunity to show off your brand in a unique way with just uploading some white background images in there? And the final thing I'll share about A+ content is that you want to optimize for both the visual and the readers. So A+ is a great mixture between visuals, right? You have the module where you have like an image, and then there's also a lot of space for text right there. And you don't want to neglect that text either, because there's different types of shoppers. Yes, most people can see information a lot more easily visually, but a lot of people prefer to read, and especially the older demographic, the long form text works a lot better for the older demographic than it does for the younger demographic. That's why a lot of the marketers who really focus on supplements that old people like, longevity supplements and brain inflammation supplements and things like that, almost always the best sales pages for those are long form sales copy, like on their own website and things like that. They'll write something that takes half an hour to read through the entire thing, which would never work for a fitness supplement of people who want to get super jacked at the gym or something like that. So don't waste the opportunity. You can show the same information both visually and in longer text form in A+ content. So just have the image be a super easy to understand scannable image that shows whatever piece of key information you're trying to show, and then explain it in more detail for the people who prefer to read or who just need to see more information. And that's the best way to use your A+ content.
I love it. I love it. That's really good info. Danny, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into this Amazon space and what led up to starting Kenji ROI. And then, of course, tell us more about what services are offered by Kenji ROI.
Yeah, so I got onto Amazon myself in 2016. It's an interesting story. After a near-death experience I had longboard racing, I just decided to get into the Amazon space. I didn't like my career as a pro downhill skateboard racer. Was making almost no money. It was really fun, but after a near-death experience, almost hitting a motorcycle head-on when I was in the Philippines on a very remote island, I'm like, I need to reevaluate what I'm doing with my life. So just got into Amazon. And then Kenji ROI kind of sprouted out of that. As I was a newer Amazon seller, and for the first 6 months of my Amazon business, very hard to extract profit from the business because you have to reinvest into more products, right? So I was doing the listings on the side. We started with the listing copywriting and the keywords, a lot of what we're talking about today, and then we expanded our services to the product photography. So we have a full product photography team here with me in Bali, and then also product video, A+ content. So we really just expanded to a team of, we're now about 25 people, 25 full-time employees, just mostly focused on Amazon listing optimization and all the pieces of Amazon. So we really just help with essentially what we're talking about today, the optimizing Amazon listings in a way that convert to sales, but intentionally with a lot of research done into why each image is done a certain way. Not just, hey, take some photos of my product and make it look nice, but hey, like make photos of my product that are going to actually translate into sales on Amazon using methods that are proven to work.
Yeah, it's I think it was not too long ago. You did a really long post about kind of where you were and where you came from, just to back up a little on Danny's story. And you had pictures in there, and I think there was even some video clips of you longboarding. And man, that was some pretty crazy stuff, Danny, I have to say. It was pretty interesting though. But yeah, it's cool how you really pivot. You pivot kind of your whole life, and got this great company, Kenji ROI. Tell everybody a little bit about if they want to get a hold of Kenji ROI, how do they get a hold of you, or how do they get a hold of the company if they want to take advantage of the services you have and be able to maybe have you guys help with listing optimizations, obviously brand photography, things like that? Go ahead.
Yeah, so if you want to check out Kenji ROI, kenjiroi.com, KENJIROI.com. You can see all of our services and pricing there on the pricing page. And then there's a little link to just reach out and request a quote. So just ask you a little bit about what you're looking for in your products. So that's the best place for that. Or if you just want to ask me questions, you can feel free to DM me on Instagram or Facebook. It's I am Danny Carlson on either of those platforms.
Yeah, that's perfect. So again, everybody who's listening in, obviously I got it up on the screen if you want to take a look, but those are listening. It's Kenji, KENJIROI.com, KenjiROI.com, or you could also email support@KenjiROI.com, and somebody will probably be able to help you there if you have questions for them. And I'm sure if it's a question for Danny, they'll make sure he gets it. You're always welcome to post a question down in the comments area, and I will make sure I send it over to Danny and get an answer for it. If you have any other things you want to know about, or more information about Amazon listing optimizations that maybe we didn't cover that you're interested in. Always great having you on, Danny. It was great seeing you about a month ago. And it was kind of funny. I was looking back. It's been probably a good year plus since you've been on one of my podcasts. So it was really fun to get you back on. Always great information. I hope everybody can take advantage of all the different things that Danny talked about, and, put a little time into those listing optimizations, and I'm sure you'll definitely see some rewards come from it. Thanks again, Danny, for being on. And again, KenjiROI.com. Be sure to check that out, everyone. And appreciate it again, Danny. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me on, Rob. Pleasure as always.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Sellernomics podcast. Special thanks to our sponsor, GETIDA. Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics. Be sure to join us again next week for more great tips on how to grow your business. And thanks again for listening.